Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FC2 reading series. I am Mark Anthony Richardson, your host. Tonight, we will be having readings by Joanna Novak, Yannick Murphy, and myself for our fall book releases. Just before we start, I'm going to say a little bit about Fiction Collective 2. FC2 is a hub for artistically adventurous, non-traditional fiction. Is a non-profit publisher run by writers. Since its origin in 1974, membership of the collective has grown from 6 founding author members to well over 100 today. FC2 has published more than 200 books and continues to publish 6 books every year. 3 in the fall and 3 in the spring. FC2 is committed to finding fresh experimental works, both through member-sponsored submissions and through 2 annual competitions, the Ronald Sukenik Innovative Fiction Contest and the Catherine Doctorow Innovative Fiction Prize. Both are still, the contests are open now, up until November the 1st. FC2 receives financial support from the Jarvis and Constant Doctorow Family Foundation. Also, a little bit, the judges for the Ronald Sukenik Prize will be Mariam Krolos, and the judge for the Catherine Doctorow Prize would be Christina Rivera Garza. All FC2 books are currently 40% off, both print and ebooks, and all the ebooks are $5.97. Okay. Joanna Novak's short story collection, Meaningful Work, won the 2020 Ronald Sukenik Innovative Fiction Contest and was published in August. Her 3rd book of poetry, New Life, Black Lawrence Press, will be published in October. Her debut memoir, Contradiction Days, Catapult, will be published in 2023. Author of the novel, I Must Have You, and 2 books of poetry, Noir Mania and Abeyance, North America. Her work has appeared in the Paris Review, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, and other publications. She is a co-founder of the literary journal and chapbook publisher, Tammy. A stunning look at the labor of obsession in the industry of self-destruction. In her lush, lyrical, and unflinching short fiction debut, Joanna Novak examines the restless throb of desire amid the rote work of jobs and obligations. From the walk-ins of a New York banquet kitchen to the pier of Venice Beach, celebrating the grueling beauty of the shift and the ticking virtues of self-restraint. Meaningful Work is a pageant of formal experimentation in fearless, glittering prose. Junot Diaz, Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde and This Is How You Lose Her, says that meaningful work is an incandescent debut by incandescent talent. The stories are truly marvelous, radiant with wit, beauty, and hard-earned truths. Novak does soul work in these pages. You will find her mesmerized, thrilled, renewed. You will find yourself mesmerized, thrilled, renewed. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, Mark, that was lovely. Thank you. I am mesmerized, thrilled, and renewed right now just to be reading with all of you. And thank you for everyone who's here for spending a Thursday night together. I'm going to be reading a story from Meaningful Work. And this story is called Cake Eater. And it appeared in Fenceless 2 falls ago. Cake Eater. I stared and the man ate. Cake in his grip, he reminded me of a cartoon bear pawing honey. He had round eyes as white as frosting. He stood at the end of the bar, where the cake was set out next to a caddy of garnishes, limes and lemons and cocktail onions, on a gold board with scalloped edges, a sheet cake commemorating an event someone had forgotten to celebrate. Really, when is cake mere compliment? The man had a globular stomach and held the cake like a sandwich. I was fascinated, horrified, and already aroused. I had never seen an adult eat cake in this manner. Before I could second guess myself, I was walking up to him. Closer, I could see the wrinkles in his shirt. That made sense. His pants didn't. Dark denim that I knew could ink one's thighs. Hey, I pointed to the cake in his hand, the piece on my plate. Is it worth it? He chewed as much as you need to with soft cake goodly iced. His gaze swabbed my face, the way my doctor mined my cervix. Not bad, he said, though it's no breast milk. I was amused but used to louche fellows, true reproachables. This man had a jutting quality, like he was being yanked forward off a shelf. I focused my vision on his porous forehead. My cake stiffened. You're a father then, I said. Twins, the man said. Patty cake, patty cake. You have your hands full. But with what? At that, he squeezed the cake in his grip. The frosting squelched. It would have been a sound we heard if the music weren't loud, a falsetto chanting, afraid to die. The man clearly meant this desecration to punctuate our exchange, but I was alone, pregnant, and desperate to be defiled, so I followed him outside. We found ourselves standing at a tall table in the plastic bubble blistered over the front of the building. Call it a tent, but there were many windows and a roof with fans, the blades molded to resemble bamboo, slowly rustling the humectant air. I have to ask you, why exactly are you at this event? The man said. A favor, a past, I said, more or less a reunion before I give birth. I didn't recognize you, he said suddenly. Now I see, your arms are different. We barely know each other then, I said, but now we both like cake. The windows in the plastic enclosing us were opaque with exhalation. I nudged the cake around my plate, using the chin of the fork. I had only raked the frosting. The man ate his last bite and smiled. The frosting is homeless shelter frosting, food pantry frosting. ¿Te hablas español? I did speak Spanish. I hola to everyone in my neighborhood, but I couldn't come up with a claro por supuesto como no. I balanced the cake on my belly. What of it? Getting dirty, sucia. Sticky sweat was glomming my camisa where the cotton clung to my spine. My newly popped navel pressed against the cloth like a spare button. Let me tell you, it's not as hard as you think, the man said. I was very energized by fatherhood, and my wife is wonderful with directions. Giving them. She's a project manager for a stable. From farm to table? How about from pasture to Saratoga? Your children will ride, I said, hoping to sound suggestive. God, no, please no, the man said. He wiped his hands on his shirt where they left a crumbly white smudge like dead skin. We're horse-eating people from the north. Somewhere in the night, there was a sound like the exoskeleton of Earth's core being crunched. I was nervous, but one gets nothing as the instigator of fear, not without smoke or fireworks. There's a gulf between fear and nervousness, pain and lonesomeness, anger and solitude. The man was keeping me company. He might come back to my hotel, down for a discalced romp, parenthetical, unthinkable. He had pink on his lip from a lone frosting rose. You want to see something straight awesome, the man said. I shrugged, but Lord, was I ever. Desperate, desperate, desperate. I left my cake on the table. He pushed out the tent and into the barking night. I followed him up the footpath through a grove of bare magnolias and into the parking lot. I was still hungry and the baby was turning, glowing, worming. I had seen others eating cake from waxy cups, the tiny breed that comes with water coolers. I regretted not smashing mine into one of those. The man reached into the tight back pocket of his dark denim and pinched some remote. This was his car, the Carrera irradiated inside by green flashing lights. He nodded at the illumination, perhaps expecting a remark on the color, but I had my own father whose convertible could strove interiorly, exteriorly, with the dial's twist. I had a husband too, some other fuckery. Meet the mother of my children, he said, and the twins, Kula and Carl. He opened the back door on the driver's side and stepped aside. A crimp-coated cocker spaniel panted there, lying on a pillow inlaid with silver rope. It shone in an emerald tremor of overhead lights. There were two friendly-faced stuffed baby dolls in the dog's nest, and a spear of bone, elk antler most likely. I wanted to go. I had the room nearby, a room from whence I had wandered in search of a convincing meal, conversation, some belittled coming. I had kept my heart as open as batter for eggs. Now the humidity was mounting. My uterus was cramping. The hailstorm forecasted had never broke. I had counted on weather to relieve my problems, but the weather was a coward, like me. You see, without a witness, this is nothing, the man said, unbuttoning his shirt. He crouched as though he were fetching items from a very low shelf in the grocery. In the green overhead dim, the sparse hair on his chest was whiskery, wiry, feelers on a microscopic bug. The cocker spaniel rolled over and exposed her scrubbed belly, nipply and speckled. The man picked up the baby dolls, roughly, much as he had picked up the cake, and situated them near the dog's heart. Between a Y of blue veins, I swear I could see a tremulous pulse. By now, the night was burned up and starving. I took a few steps back. My father, the dog barked. My darling, the man said, and his face grew compassionate, and he knelt on the seat and set a hand on the lower abdomen of the dog. I imagined the cake back in my hand. I imagined stabbing the cake and taking a bite. It was marble. The chocolate was indistinct from the vanilla cloaked in all that icing. Roseless, sugarful, stupid cake. I expected such cake for a push present. Do you need a nurse or a midwife? I said. The man looked at me puzzled. By that time, he was fully inside his own back seat, and with one of his hind legs, he kicked the door. Soon it was noisy with suckling, and his windows began to fog. There was cake smeared on the front of my camisa, and I walked back to my hotel, watching my shadow grow rounder and rounder until it was a shadow globe. Alone in bed, my stomach howled. I opened my legs. In the next room, a dog yapped like a snapping wet rag. Could he smell me, my hormonal tort, so progesterone? Whatever the odor, I was embarrassed and yet more defiant than usual. Perhaps I was great with child, but there was no way I could wait until breakfast. Thank you.
Beautiful and meaningful work. Yannick Murphy won the 2020 FC2 Catherine Doctoral Innovative Fiction Prize for her short story collection, By the Time You Read This. Past publications include 2 other short story collections, 5 novels, and 3 children's books. Her work has been published by Alfred A. Knopf, Little Brown and Company, Houghton Mifflin, Harper Perennial, McSweeney's, and Dzanc. She is the recipient of various awards, including a Pushcart Prize, a Lawrence L. and Thomas Winship Penn New England Award, a Whiting Writers Award, a National Endowment for the Arts Award, and a Chesterfield Screenwriting Award. Her story, In a Bear's Eye, was published in the 2007 O. Henry Prize Stories. She lives in Vermont with her husband, her 3 children, her 3 dogs, and a lot of mice. Her novel, The Call, is based on her husband, a large animal veterinarian. The truths revealed and the lives upended in the 13 stories that make up Yannick Murphy's By the Time You Read This are at once singularly foreign and uncannily familiar. From a wife penning a series of suicide notes to her family that verge on the comic, hovering between the tyrannical and the absurd, to a young girl left with caretakers in New York, drawing on her potent imagination with consequences in real life that are both liberating and disastrous. As with her previous novels and story collections, Murphy's keen rendering of these desperate, complex lives illuminate in ways both quiet and startling our capacity for deliverance and devastation through daring acts of self-invention. Kate Walbert, National Book Award finalist and author of His Favorites and A Short History of Women, states that the darkly funny, brilliantly absurd, insightful, poignant, and often heartbreaking stories in Murphy's career-spanning collection, By the Time You Read This, affirm her place among the best of our writers. Each is a wry, sparkling testimony to our struggles to connect in family, love, and friendship. Her narrators reach for the speech of the heart, whether from the depths of a submarine or in an extended suicide note. Hi, Yannick.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mark Anthony. That was beautiful. Thank you. This is going to be one of the readings for the record because my dog had 11 puppies and they're right next door and they hear me and they hear my voice and they usually sleep, but I think they're all around, scrambling around there and making little whining noises. So this would have been a good probably background noise for Joanna's story with the dogs, but hopefully they won't make too much noise. This is a short story that is called Unreal Blue, and it's the last short story in the book. And I had a big challenge when I was asked to read at this reading because the time limit was 15 minutes for the story, and I realized all of my stories are way over 15 minutes. And I was looking around, making sure I had one that's 15 minutes or so. So I was lucky. It's the very last one, last but not least, 15 minutes. Unreal Blue. We are going down south. The car is named Clara. We will stay in a beach house. Our mother says she doesn't know how we will do it. We have Jody's mice and the dog and the cats all the way in the back of Clara. She says she supposes we will have to be sneaks and not let motels know about our pets. Our mother wears a sweatshirt and blue jeans, and her feet are bare on Clara's pedals the whole drive down. Clara and the beach house are on loan from a friend of my mother's. The friend has taken her family to Tunis. That's in Tunisia, our mother tells us. When we get out of Clara to use the gas station bathroom, our mother says, "Where are my clogs? Has anyone seen my clogs?" And when we finally find them for her, they are under the sleeping dog's rib cage in the back of the car. She slips them on and clops off to the bathroom, brushing off crumbs from her sweatshirt that collected there while eating sandwiches slapped together on the highway. We ride the whole way down with the windows wide open because Clara stinks like our garbage, which we drove to the dump and threw out right before we left our place. Our hair is bushy from wind, and so is the dogs and the cats and the mice whose fur got fluffed even with them in cages by our feet. Ma Mère, our grandmother, sits with our mother in the front. Really, she lays in the front, her head resting on our mother's lap while our mother drives. We stop at Stuckey's for dinner, and Ma Mère orders wine. "Where do you see wine?" our mother asks her. And instead of pointing to the menu, Ma Mère points out the window. to a bus shelter where Gallo is advertised. That's not in here, that's out there, our mother tells her. Ma mère lowers her head. On her hair, we can see crumbs that must have fallen while our mother ate and drove with ma mère, resting her head on our mother's lap. Then ma mère bangs on her leg with her fist, like she usually does, trying to get rid of a pain she says she's going to have to start thinking of like a friend because it's always around. Louisa has taken her French horn and plays it while we drive. The dog can't sleep through the 4 seasons and stands in the back of Clara panting, blocking my mother's view of out the rear. We're crossing lanes by having ma mère hold her hand out the passenger window, signaling other cars. But ma mère's signaling looks more like fingers tapping on the car door than a full-fledged plea to give way. Horns honk, and an officer in a patrol car pulls us over. Ma'am, he says to our mother. Yes, sir, officer, our mother says. Are you aware you've got a faulty turn signal? He says. Yes, sir, officer. I'm well aware, but she's got a blockage in her leg, our mother says. Fix it, the officer says. And that's all, and he gets back in his car and drives away. Our getting off easy, we attribute to our mother's outstanding good looks, and so does she. The ocean's water is as hot as the air. I can't even tell if I'm in or I'm out, our mother says. And when we are in, we are always being whistled out by lifeguards with binoculars who have spotted circling sharks beyond the breakers. We collect sand dollars and stack them like blocks, creating sand dollar walls several feet high, which we have trained the dog to jump over like a trick. There are rats in the palms, Jody says, and she takes a jar of peanut butter and cups her hand and digs into it, bringing up blobs of it that she wipes at the base of the palms so that the rats have something to eat. So many rats come to the trees near our beach house that it sounds like a constant storm, the leaves always shaking and great fronds falling down on our roof. Compared to other houses, ours looks like it's in camouflage, and we're preparing for a siege with the sand dollar wall as additional fortification. For days, the ocean is calm, and ma mère thinks she can walk on it, and we have to pull her back, make her sit on the beach again in her chair. She has found a good stick, one with a knob at the end that she has begun to use instead of her fist, and she bangs at the side of her leg with the stick, like some kind of grass-skirted, nipple-pierced tribal king performing rites of the ceremonial kind. We get a postcard from my mother's friends. A tourist is standing in a square in Tunis with his arms held out, and pigeons, not one, but maybe 5, are sitting on his head and sitting up and down his arms, all in different stages of flight. Down the man's shirt, it is all stained with the gray and white shit of the pigeons. And Louisa points and says, "Look, there is even pigeon shit hanging off the man's nose." We're having the better vacation, our mother says after reading the postcard. We are, we say. Sure, they've been robbed twice, lost their son, found him again, but shorter as his shoes were stolen by highway thieves, she says. There's a snack wagon near the lifeguard shack. The guy who runs it has arms so tan you'd think he'd held them above flames and turned his arms slowly round and round. The giveaway that he didn't is that there's still hair on his arms, blonde curly hair so thick it could be head hair instead. He doesn't give us anything for free, even if we sit by his snack wagon all day saying out loud how we wished we had a cool drink to quench our parched lips or a creamsicle to stave off our indescribable hunger, which Louisa says she will describe for our benefit. A hunger, she says, like wild dogs attacking each other in the base of her gut, held clamp, jaw to tail, rolling and rolling inside her in a frenzy of gastric juices. The tan man, even after Louise's description, still doesn't seem to hear us. And when the afternoon is slow, he climbs the ladder to the roof of his silver snack wagon and sunbathes, sitting in a chair and holding an aluminum pie tin under his chin to catch maximum sun. The snack wagon sells an assortment of postcards, most of them of the beach which we are at and the color of the ocean, a blue we have all agreed we have never seen the ocean before. That's unreal blue, Louisa says, like she knows its name. And we nod our heads. It's sounding like a true color, like cerulean or teal. We find forgotten dimes in the payphone and have enough to buy one postcard, which we all agree should be sent to our father. Although I try to convince Louisa and Jody we should send it to my friend Rena first, and then Rena could send it on to our father. But my sisters shake their heads sadly at my stupidity, and we take turns writing each other's word, and our handwriting is so different from one another's that it looks like we're sending our father some kind of ransom note composed of cutout typeface from magazines pasted on in uneven lines. We tell him this is where we swim. We say the waves are never as good as this picture. Say send money, our mother says over our shoulders. And so we say send money, and our mother says mailed. And we ask her how to spell that, and she says S-H-I-T. And so we spell shit, and then our brother says it will never get through postal services with a curse word on it. So we try and think of words that begin with shit so we can turn it into a word that is not a curse word, but we can't think of any. My brother says Shiite might work and tells us to squeeze in an I into the middle of shit and an E at the end. Then we write the word no in front of Shiite so that our postcard now reads, no Shiite here. Which is true, our brother says, while tightening the belt of his blue silk robe. I haven't seen one Shiite, have you? Money won't come, we know. We left no return address, and all our fathers got to go on is a picture postcard of some unreal blue ocean and the knowledge of the place that it's free of Shiites. Money won't come because he won't send it, Louisa says. And we nod our heads and break up our postcard writing operation and drift off to separate rooms of the house or onto the beach or to the sandy path that I choose, it being cool and shady and forested with thick trunked trees entwined with huge ropey vines that look to strangle the lives out of the poor tree's wood. One night, we all wake up at the same time because of the sudden quiet. Ma mère has stopped banging her leg. We all rush to her, thinking the worst, but she's standing at the window, pointing at a bum wandering on the beach, asking our mother in French if she remembers her father. And our mother answers, of course she remembers her father. And ma mère draws our mother near and puts a hand on our mother's shoulder and says in French, vois-tu, there he is, my husband, wave to him, she says. Our mother waves to him and puts her arm around ma mère's waist, and the two of them watch the bum, reeling, drunk, trying to make his way up the beach. In the morning, the bum is at our breakfast table. There is so much sand in his pant cuffs that it spills at a regular rate like a timer onto our kitchen floor while he eats cold leftover pizza our mother has served him on a plate, but he eats it over the box instead. His name is Manolo, and he is not our mother's father. But he is hungry, our mother says, and ma mère from her chair on the living room says, oui, he is hungry. So we have to let him stay. And our mother finds some of my brother's shorts that she packed that he never wears, and she gives them to Manolo to wear. When Manolo swims, he walks into the water as if he were walking into a room. He pulls open an imaginary handle and then turns to shut it behind him. In shallows, he sits with the water up to his chest, smoking a cigarette. He is kept dry the whole time behind his ear. Call him uncle, our mother says. Uncle, we all cry out. He could be yours. He looks so much like my father, she says, and she makes him special meals cooked with saffron that stains the wooden spoons yellow. That's what it does to your insides too, Louisa says, holding up the yellowed wooden spoons, showing us how we are yellow-bellied. When our vacation is over, Manolo is packed into Clara with us, holding the mice cage on his lap, speaking in Spanish to the mice, and my sister Jody telling him they don't know Spanish, only some French now, and Manolo pokes his fingers through the holes in the wire cage, trying to pet their sides, saying when he does, que suave, que suave. On the long drive back north, my mare talks to Manolo in French, and he answers in Spanish, and my sisters and I speak Pig Latin, Jody throwing in some ASL she learned in school, demanding we look at her while she signs. Back in the city, Manolo wants to sleep in Clara parked on the street, saying he feels comfortable there, and when it's time for us to return Clara to our mother's friends, our mother asks to borrow it for more time, lying, saying she's got errands in New Jersey and Connecticut. But finally, the car has to be returned, and Manolo says formal goodbyes, getting on his hands and knees, kissing our mother's feet and fingertips, and kissing the tops of our heads and hugging our brother, and then standing back and feeling our brother's robe between his fingers and nodding his head with approval. When he says goodbye to Ma Mère, she begs him not to go, and she holds on so hard to his frayed shirt collar that a piece of it rips and comes off in her hands. And he leaves, and she's still holding the shirt collar remnant and crying. And then she touches the cloth and says, que suave, and closes her eyes. My sisters and I go to the park. The three of us hold out our arms, seeing if the pigeons will fly down and perch in a line up and down our arms like they did to the tourist in Tunis. But the pigeons don't. They stay close to the ground, pecking at crumbs that were once white but are now smudged gray with dirt. My arms are tired, Jody says. I can't keep this up, she says. You can do it. Just leave them up, Louisa says. They will come, she says. And then she helps us. She lifts the tips of her fingers under the tips of our fingers and holds us aloft. Thank you.
By the time you read this, by Yannick Murphy.
Greetings. My name is Michael Mejia. I'm a member of the FC2 board, and I'm here this evening, obviously, to enjoy this amazing reading. Thank you so much, Yannick and Joanna. It's been fantastic. But I'm also here to introduce our final reader, Mark Anthony Richardson, who didn't want to introduce himself, of course. But I'm of course happy to do it, and I will reveal why. But Mark, just to start off though, Mark Anthony Richardson is an artist and novelist from the great city of Philadelphia, PA. His debut novel, Year of the Rat, won the 2015 Ronald Sukenick Innovative Fiction Prize and the 2017 American Book Award. He's also been the recipient of a PEN America grant, a Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Fellowship, and a Vermont Studio Center residency. His work has appeared in several journals and the anthology Who Will Speak for America, published by Temple University Press. He received his MFA from Mills College, and he's taught at Rutgers University and now at the University of Pennsylvania, which awarded him a 2021 Sachs Program grant for Arts Innovation for his novel in progress, And that work has also been supported by, or is supported by, a 2021 Creative Capital Award. So I first met Mark Anthony through his writing when I chose his manuscript, Year of the Rat, as the winner of the 2015 Sukanik contest. I've been a fan and a supporter ever since. The Sukanik is a contest intended to attract new voices to the FC2, and it's open now. So as you know, so definitely spread the word, submit, etc. Year of the Rat was most certainly was and is that a new voice for FC2. Its language and anguished, desperately alive narration are truly unique and bewildering, captivating, and completely convincing from the first page, leading us on a wild ride that is by turns lurid, weirdly lucid, vulnerable, earthy, and highly sophisticated. All of these things I found are very much who Mark Anthony himself is as a human being, which is to say that what I admire about his work is how entirely present Mark Anthony is on every page, and how fearless he shows, and the fearlessness he shows in confounding and challenging his readers, which it seems to me is completely true to the ambitions he's always striven for as an artist. Messiahs, his recently released work, is a deeply satisfying follow-up to Rat. A tale of struggle and healing, the novel tracks two lovers fractured by separate traumas, communing through the winter in a snowbound retreat. The man has recently been released from prison, from death row, where, through the mechanism of a fictional proxy initiative, he offered to take on his nephew's sentence. As we learn the narrative behind Uncle's decision and his release, we hear too what now leads his lover toward her own decision about whether or not to take on a similar burden for her own brother. As I said, I've become an ardent fan of Mark Anthony's, and a central reason I leapt at the chance to work with him to prepare Messiahs for publication was to have the opportunity to linger for a while and observe a bit more closely the workings of his dense and visceral prose. A process that, with Mark Anthony's work, is somewhat like climbing into and exploring a body. I have no doubt that you readers and listeners here tonight will appreciate being similarly overwhelmed, and I urge you, if you haven't already, to get yourself a copy of this deeply humane and important reflection on mercy, love, and justice, and to stay tuned for what our friend here will be bringing you next. So please join me in welcoming Mark Anthony Richardson.
Thank you, Michael. So kind. I'm going to read from the beginning. Once a man becomes a wife, they are a new creature and should be addressed as such, he says to her. Whispers. For women, listen for whispering men. For their fathers with the force of a folktale on the black of their beds at night in the cabins of North Country. A northeasterly tryst for this woman of Asian and this man of African antecedents, both birthed in this modern American state, one of the 5 that has embraced the proxy initiative. Whispers with those coy wolves crying outside now in the snow, after conjuring the couple of men on the road with him who had just severed their scrota. Anathemas for the death house. No, she does not know why he's thinking about this, she thinks. Yes, she knows why he's thinking about this, she thinks. The quail eggs at supper, the white plate, the spilled wine upon them, and the astonishing effect of red on white. And then the way the scrota lay there outside of the feed slots of the men's single white cells at dawn. Not like shaven little skin sacks with their testes attached to their tunicae, but like bloody little newborn rats. But before this, the screaming, the adrenaline, and the quiet stench of iron in the air with his fortitude it took to stay standing, just long enough to sever and to shove yourself through a slot. There are spermatic cords sawed through by blades extracted from daily safety razors, by miscellaneous bits of metal, by pork chop bones with the plastic handles of toothbrushes ground down on the concrete for cutlery. For he saw all 4 rectangle 2 at a time, in each sack all bloody and burgundy in his hand mirror after his forearm shot through the feed slot of his single white cell at dawn. the vertical bars in the square above the slot being too close together to squeeze a forearm through, akin to a cashier's window, with the more spaced apart bars around the window sheeted with white metal mesh, as it was with all the cells and is still, white blood cells. His acrylic shaving mirror angled downwardly and just right to reflect the reverse and inverted images onto his retina to be rightened by the brain. For first, the mirror was facing the northeast, then the southwest, and then the northeast again, with each time needing to be handled by the opposite hand. For he was on either side of him, these men, and he between them. Testis, witness. Yet testis unus testis nullus. For you would need another to corroborate this sight in your head. For the testimony of one is to be disregarded unless corroborated by the testimony of another. For there's no video surveillance in this ancient execution unit. No way to catch the guards doing what they're ordered to do. Only the other hand mirrors looking out on the road with you. So then fucking Christ, one of the guards cries, above a plash of footgear. For this guard still cries in his head as they must have lain there, these two crimsoning men inside the leukocytes of their separate cells. A malady to society to either side of him. One white and one black, and both outrageously stark naked, passed out from the shock or from the blood lack, prostrate or face up on the concrete, coolness against the red warmth rippling out, and with their cocks now monstrously clitoral. But as he is saying again to her that once a man becomes a wife, they are a new creature and should be addressed as such, she is already in the kitchen in her mind and then later in her body because she can't stand to be in bed with him anymore. Because there's this shitty kitchen in my belly, she thinks. The wine and the excuse for giving him my bed, and I must need to organize this shit, she thinks. Fueled by the burgundy while cutting on the lights, with hoping, with scrubbing, and holding my boy up high by the waist to wipe his little Buddha. I need to dunk my hands in water. I need to fill this fucking kitchen up with scalding hot water, this sink. I need to go outside and stoop in the snow and plunge them in, hold them in it, and rush them into this sink. Oh God, the hum in my hands, the burn. So there's a scalding after she rushes in and she is calm and thinking of that sea again. I need to think of the sea every now and again, she once wrote to him. For I am forgetting him. I am not normal. I need to feel the warm seawater like bathwater, for I never want to forget how warm the seawater was, like bathwater, she wrote, to lead up to her, to explain her, for it had already been 1.5 years then since she'd seen her or any ocean at all, her mother, and now over 3 years have passed. Nor forget the clownfishes I saw swimming inside of it deep sea diving. Those small orange bodies with their bold white vertical bars accented by black, how those protandrous tropical harlequins can engender both genders and live symbiotically among the death sting of the sea anemones. How the biggest fish, the queen clownfish, the only female fish in a school of male fish, stresses the next biggest fish, the male mate, and stresses the male to keep the mate male, who then stresses the remaining males. For though being born males, the decrease of cortisol will turn the males into females. But when she dies, she is bound to die. The male mate will become larger and rise to the rank of a female alpha stressor, whereas the next biggest will become larger and rise to the rank of the new male mate. But by and by, as this cycle began afresh in its supermax, he wrote back, responding to her missive, redolent of her vaginal scent smeared across it, his spent semen smeared across his. The hierarchy is reversed. It is the least of the males who are turning female in their standard prison attire, orange accented by bars painted white while living among the sting of the death house for years. The administration and the warden and the guard have all stretched out those men, those lovers, so supremely those lovers who will never touch each other from separate cells, that I, who was centered between them like a muscular pump, could feel them both thrumming their deoxygenated desires through a heart that just had to oxygenate and deliver them respectively and readily and aided and abetted them unknowingly. The dawn of that double self-castration when the light is coming through the windows and stretching knife-like down the corridor to our door, to my doors when we do it, he wrote back. He must have wrote back, the black lover to the white, or at least as I imagined him, because neither of them had a watch nor wanted one, and he would romanticize the moment as only a madman would do. I aided that note, those notes, for there are no clocks, no cameras, no way to catch the guards doing what they're ordered to do, as guards are wont to do, to keep the quiet in here. I aided those notes, as did the man before me, for as you know, I have been on this road now for over a year, but they, the black lover and the white, have both been here for over a decade, and the dead man before me in this cell only did it for something from the commissary. Aided their correspondence for a pack of gum, a candy bar, a couple of cigarettes, which could be passed along as well. I did it for free. Though I could have been caught, I should have been caught and consigned to administrative segregation, thus losing my daily hour outside inside a kennel, among other things, in my good standing too. For returning to solitary requires less justification than when a man first entered it. That space with no sound, no soul, no sunlight, only the dim lights of an eerie fluorescent twilight as you lose some eyesight in your perception of depth. The phenomenology of an alien world where the nimbuses of a lover's nipples hover above you and the shit beside you, and the silence is often broken by cockroaches and mice scuttling around like the sound of the shells being peeled away from your hard-boiled eggs, where every little detail is constantly eating you alive. The smell of the aftershave of a trial witness, the bags under a mother's eyes, the smirk of an arresting officer, the smell of bacon. A corner you could have turned into bed bugs, a breath being the dinner bell. The carbon dioxide exhaled in sleep and the waking up to their Lilliputian shit smeared across the sheets, each having swiped a blood payment. Everlasting vigilantes that can fit into a crack the slimness of a credit card. Yes, he wrote this, the man, but not for the woman, for fear of the officials. For with a few sheets already written, for this reason, he had ended the missive after writing while living among the sting of the death house for years, and just signed off with his disgust. Disgusted at what wasn't inveighed against and never would be. Yet, throughout that night, on separate sheets, he continued to write and reread and rewrite, as writers are wont to do, words he would destroy soon after he was finished with them before falling asleep, only to rewrite them again the next night and on later nights, destroying them every day, though the writing was still a terrible risk, for his cell could have been tossed at any time. But he had needed to write them, so he wrote and destroyed and rewrote them after memorizing what he would always have to undo, as prison writers are wont to do, kept writing from memory. The administration, the warden, and the guards have all stretched out those men, and so on and over these words that would never be sent, only torn up and flushed away again and again. And so, yes, I helped them. I helped them with those notes. I did it for myself. I did it for this solitude, this schism of the heart in the week before they did it. During any one of our note passing moments, they were always less than 15 minutes away from being caught and kept whole men, these men, the black lover and the white, who will now be removed to separate supermaxes once their bodies stabilize, having gone through their hemorrhagic shocks, with that black brain suffering the blood lack the most. Yes. Less than 15 minutes away from being caught and kept whole men, these half men who didn't want to become whole men again, but wives to each other, who would have severed their sexes entirely had they not fainted. Or at least that's what the meme is, I hear. When that whole superhighway to half-truths, the gospel of the new World Wide Web, the gospel of that God perhaps, the one who first found them and shouted, "They cut off their balls, they cut off their balls." The nigger and the redneck. Why are the men who are in love with men always and only news when they are deviant or aberrant? Some think they're just trying to get off of the roll by feigning insanity, but only the incomprehension of the nature of your crime in connection to your punishment can do this, which for a psychiatrist can be damn near impossible to prove. I think they just want to be whole again, for they believe they were. Yet when the white was fitted for a suit, the linchpin was pulled. A guard was sashayed down this row every 15 minutes. For every 15 minutes is the standard. The watch before the death watch cell. The holding cell of the off-site facility serving signed warrants where the white was to be transported. But I still passed along those notes between those times sometimes, those watches, and maybe even once a packaged horde of painkillers to prepare the other for the pain. Or maybe that razor blade for the white. God knows how he got it. Pass along those notes for the last week they were to be together, for no one can talk along the road and an echo can carry you away on a gurney if you want. The sounds of the standard televisions and radios inside the cells, for those who can afford them and are fairly good standing, are suppressed by near defunct headphones. So there are only footfalls and flushes and farts and snores and coughs and slushes and trickles and drips. And after a guard would pass by and his footsteps had faded away, one of the lovers would stick his acrylic shaving mirror through the fee slot to scan up along the row. For our arms are not only blocked by bars, but by white metal mesh. And once the coast was clear, he would take up a long piece of yarn wrapped around a weighted note and would wind the other end around a forefinger and whisper for me. Then reach out to swing the weight over to my slot where I would snatch it and swing it to the other lover after whispering for him, and then vice versa later. A pack of gum, a candy bar, a couple of cigarettes, all had passed along this way, possibly even permitted by the guards, the lax ones. But it has been a week out, and though I've been asked about it, I have yet to be connected to it. Nor do I believe I ever will be, for that guard is gone, the one who first found them, a lax one who had handed out to everyone other than the white lover that day those daily safety razors to be collected later. Because maybe a few days before this, the white had distracted the guard and was not just cursing him without a care, from checking and seeing that that daily safety razor, the one the black was handing back to him, was missing his razor blade. Maybe he, not me, had helped him with those notes for money from a relative of theirs, or maybe it was a trustee, an inmate in the warden's favor, who mopped the floors, delivered the food, retrieved the trays. For now, one's been replaced by another. And of course, they could have communicated in codes to the ventilation vents in the rear, though not so effectively. During the day when the guards will converse crassly or after they yell up, mail up, chow up, shower up, for a rower, for we are always undertaking this awful rowing toward God. Is always alone in the day room or in a stall with communal kennel outside for his 1 hour a day, 6 days a week. He eats alone, he sleeps alone, he fades away, but not before he would whisper. So I aided them, as did the man before me, with the bosom of a Jehovah, Jehovah, as I am called and always called by the guards here as jeer. Jehovah, Jehovah, one can call along the corridor, outside this row, and an echo can carry for a year. Thank you. Well, that's a hard segue into Q&A. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening to all of us. And what we're going to do now is go into the Q&A. And if you have a question, I'm going to start looking for questions, and I'm going to call on you if you'd like to voice your question. Just unmute. I believe you'll be able to unmute yourself and go right ahead and shoot. So right now, I'm just looking for some questions. But until then, oh, hold on for 1 second. All right. Okay. I have a quick question actually for Yannick and Joanna. So maybe you two can unmute. I'm always curious about the seed for a book or a collection of short stories. What were yours? And I could talk about mine.
Joanna,
Do
do
you-
you have an answer for that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that, a collection sort of comes together, or this collection for me came together over many years, and I think it existed in different forms. And I realized at some point that I was always writing about work. And I was always writing about like obligations and these kinds of everyday constraints we find ourselves in. And I think that's sort of what became really like interesting to me as I was putting the book together that I ended up submitting to the Suckenig Prize was how those kinds of like pressures that are like hiding in plain sight force stories. And yeah, I also think that maybe like the genesis of this was like how those spaces also like squeeze out different emotions than they're supposed to. So like the things that you end up doing at a job that you're not supposed to be doing at a job. Like I have a story in this book that takes place at a call center, which is an actual job I had when I was a grad student. And I just love those kinds of built-in containers for emotion to get really warped.
So basically things you're doing at the job that probably got you fired.
I've never been fired, but
It's okay. You're among friends.
No one can read my mind. How about you, Yannick?
I don't know. That's a tough question for me because I don't think of my collections as being connected, which probably isn't a good thing. I think most people like to see collections these days have a common theme, and mine just don't, because I see every story as kind of a new opportunity to do something I haven't done before. And that means trying not to have even common themes, let alone, a common approach to writing them. I'm always trying a different voice or approaching it from a different style than I approached the last one. So they tend not to have a seed that's in common. That's a difficult question to answer, as again, over the years, these stories have come to the surface. So some of them may have a longer length than some of the others, because as I think I'm progressing as a writer, I will try doing more with complex themes inside of a short story. And so those particular stories become longer, but that's probably the only variation, or I'm sorry, not the only variation, but the only commonality is that some of these stories are longer as a whole than a few at the edges, which, for example, the story that I read is one of the shorter ones in this particular collection.
And please, everyone, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll just call on you. If you want to unmute and voice your question, you may do so. Yannick and Joanna, after you've written the stories, do you find yourself finding a connection between some of them, or your story saying something to you that you didn't intend for it to say to you or to anyone? On some sort of, maybe you were writing it on some sort of subconscious level?
It's rare that I'll go back and read my stories. I like this evening, of course, I've read the story out loud, but I don't think I've ever read that story out loud to anyone. and just reading it, I'm like, oh, look what I did there. So it's fun to go back and see, but no, I don't.
I like that, actually. Don't look back, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I don't see the connections I made unless I reread it for some, I read it aloud to some audience.
Joanna?
I think that there's this point for me when I'm putting together a collection, whether it's like a short story collection or a collection of poetry, where I'm at like the 80% mark, like it feels almost there. And then I find myself being really mindful of like what connections I've already, like what tracks I've already laid essentially, and like how I can kind of like continue with those, like laying those tracks, or I can kind of like depart. And sometimes that's like a thematic departure. Sometimes that's like a formal departure where like I realize, oh, I have a few stories in the second person in this book. Like perhaps I don't need another one, or I really do want another one. So I kind of think about their connections to when I'm like putting together the whole of the collection.
Oh, beautiful. We have two questions, but real quick, the seed for Messiahs was a scenario that happened to me in Senegal. Actually, it was in the Gambia, which is inside Senegal, where I was caught in a rip current. And so I posed a question to several women. It had to be women. You're in the ocean. You have your son with you, and you're among other mothers teaching their children how to swim. And then you're all caught in a rip current. And during the rip current, the chaos ensuing, you grab onto a child's hand thinking it's your child, and you realize that it's not your child, but you're already in the rip. And if anyone was in a rip current, it's pretty, you can't outswim it. It's like a treadmill of water, and it's pretty scary. So you're in this rip current, and you notice you have another woman's son in your arms, and you see your son at the head of that rip current. You look to your side, and you see the mother of the son you have in your arms outside of the rip current, and she's treading water, and she sees that you have her son, and she's waving you, say, "Bring me my son, bring me my son." So at that point, what do you do? So it was that scenario that made me write Messiahs, because a friend of mine, she has 3 children. When I posed that question to her, she didn't even hesitate to answer. She said, "I will swim that boy who I have in my arms back to his mother, and then I will swim back out and try to save my son." And of course, your son may already be drowned by that time. And I asked her, why did she has 3 children. So why would you do that? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. But what she said to me was like it just clicked. She said, "You have a life in your hands right now." And I just knew that was the way in. In any story I'm writing, I need a way in. And that was the doorway. So we have several questions here. Okay. Okay. Naima, would you like to ask your question? I think you could unmute yourself. If not, I'll do it for you.
I think I've just unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. Hi, Joanna. Good to see you. My question was simply because I think I struggle with that the most. Do you find that most stories at some level are rooted in something personal, in some personal experience? I don't think we can detach ourselves from our stories. I think that any time we tell a story, we either relate it to something that's happened to us, it is something that we know has happened to someone, or something in some way or form. It's always part of a personal experience, near or far. Is that something you guys experience writing your stories? I don't know.
Yannick or John, you want to go first?
I think that all of my stories come from some some personal event, and maybe that's the springboard for me. Is it either it's some memory or someone I met or some kind of circumstance that I was in. And I remember talking to another writer about that, and they said, you know, what, do you have no imagination that you can't think of something that's totally unrelated to your life? And they're like, oh my God, they're right. You know, I have no imagination. I can only use my own life as a springboard. But I think I got over that, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I just kind of like lean into it. I mean, I think a lot of the stories in this collection also really like flirt with autofiction. There are characters that have like a warped version of my last name, or who have a warped version of my first name. And I think it's just like, I feel like I'm trying to push as much as possible on what from the personal like realm you can use and still make it feel fiction, not feel fiction, be fictional. So yeah, I mean, I think everything is rooted in something personal. But I think like what is the most personal thing about a story is often really surprising. So like for me, I think often there's like a detail is so personal and so evocative. Like in the story I read, the stomach of the man was the most personal thing. I mean, it was a person I saw at an event, and I just like really fixated on his stomach. I don't know why. And that was like this key for the whole story, you know? And so like, I think every story has one of those things that feels so true and real to the writer, or at least to me as a writer.
Yeah, I tend to try to have something personal needs to be in every page, no matter how small. And in order for me to, I need to have a drop of my blood in everything, a drop of my DNA in every scene, and have it intermingle with maybe possibly someone else's energy, maybe someone I'll never even meet. But most of the novel I had to imagine, because I've never been on death row. And death row, the whole culture in prison, especially with the execution unit, is just covered in secrecy. No one really knows what goes on beyond there, and it's all kind of hush hush. So I had to use my imagination, and I interviewed a death row attorney. She was a death row attorney for 3 decades. And she told me a lot of, it's those small little details that stick in my head like a bullet. Those small, seemingly insignificant details that really make something believable. It could be completely made out of your imagination, but if you have those little tiny details, it will seem real. And she was telling me a lot of those little details that I could have never gotten from other than from her, other than through maybe a person who was an exoneree on death row. But yeah, it was a lot of if I'm not feeling a scene like emotionally, then it's I could do without it. You know, it doesn't. It's it's expendable.
Mhm. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for answering that. I'm always personally fighting the personal, but it's interesting to hear your viewpoints and your perspectives and where you come into it. And I think it's impossible, almost always impossible, really, to get away from the personal, because as Yannick said, there's always a little something of us in there in some point or in some form or other. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Naima. Hank, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
I sure would. I just feel incredibly lucky to be here to get to listen to the authors read their work. I'm an undergrad student for English and creative writing at the University of Iowa. So half of the time, the only way I interact with authors is by reading their work. And it's so much of a different experience to hear them read it. And one of my questions was, when you write, do you ever feel that your short stories are it's a window into the brief moment that you want to tell, is this one story in a person's life. And if you wanted to, you could go back and write the whole thing. Or do you feel that your short stories, when you write them, and this is for everybody, are simply just one emotion, one story, and I want to capture it here and now in the 20, 50 odd pages that makes my short story?
Yannick and Joanna, you're the short story writers, I guess. I've never written a short story in my life. Well, that's not true. It was a bad short story, but yeah. Someone like to answer that, Yannick or Johanna?
I think that I don't feel that the stories are part of a longer story. They just keep going. And then I realize, oh, this is a longer story. So it's not something that I know. I haven't pre-gamed that, you know, I've just let it roll, and I'll look back on it and say, oh, this was definitely a part of a longer story. And I didn't realize it at the beginning. And sometimes you're writing and you feel like, oh yeah, I can feel like this is going to end soon. And it doesn't, it just keeps going. So that's always an interesting feeling where you're like, wait a second, I want to add this and I want to add that. And that's a fun part of the process.
Do you find yourself, Yannick, doing your thinking while you're writing?
No, I don't. I mean, my writing is really devoid of me doing any thinking and just doing the writing. So, so if I think too much, then I become stymied.
Nice. I guess what I meant by, I'm not thinking, but feeling it while you're writing it, because it's not pre-planned.
Right.
Organic.
No, right. No, nothing I write is pre-planned, because the fun for me and the whole thing is seeing how I'm going to make it come through the other side and what it will end up looking like. So really that's the joy for me. And so if I knew what I was doing beforehand, I probably would talk myself out of it, or I would end up having told people about it and never writing it. So there's always that danger. So I really like to do it in the sense of it's just me and the page and let's go for a ride.
Right. Exactly. Joanna?
I always, if I'm right, I never think a story is always a story. Like it's like doing a cartwheel or something. I don't think I'm going to like do cartwheels down a football field. It's like, I'm going to do a cartwheel. And so, yeah. And it's a particular kind of writing experience for me too. Like especially if I'm working on something longer, I often like cheat on the longer thing because I really want to write a story and I want the pleasure of finishing a story. Even if it's just like finishing a, lousy draft. I really, really like kind of I'm going to keep thinking in terms of cartwheels. Like I really like the kind of completion of that. And I will say that I have had the experience of like reviving characters from short stories before. And that's sort of interesting. Like I took a character from one of my stories and that character played a key role in my novel. And like, that was sort of interesting. I wasn't ever expecting that to happen, but that character was still just very alive for me. So that happened, but otherwise, yeah, stories feel distinct.
Yeah, I want to write short stories, but I'm always thinking about, I don't know, it's right now, I guess I'm fixating on the long, I love being left in it. So there's some short stories that are so well done. They're like gems. Yeah, I'm just really into this long one paragraph novel, kind of like you're in a prison cell and or a cabin in the woods and you got to work shit out. I like to be left in it, so I want to leave the reader in it for pages and pages and pages, and hopefully they'll find some sort of freedom and something about containment and confinement for me that spawns exploration. Maybe because, since I was a boy, I was always in places that I always wanted to leave. I always wanted to be far away from it. There's a beginning of a story I'm writing, which starts off, I long to miss this place. And that's pretty much was like my motto throughout growing up. I just long to miss the place. And I just and I think that just happened because I was always in some sort of confinement, whether it was a ghetto or a rough neighborhood, even a jail cell. Your imagination becomes very fertile, ferocious, really. And I kind of hope for the reader to have that experience when they experience the confinement of the text that I'm providing for them in the words and the forest of words, and daydream. I mean, put the book down and allow yourself to. I like people who daydream when they read, and you don't have to read it from cover to cover tonight. You could take the time and take a nap. Allow it to work in your subconscious mind, and allow yourself to daydream, and in that way, for me, the book takes on legs and tentacles in people's imaginations, and it starts to grow. So I try to leave things, I don't know, the long story form. So I just got used to that right now. So maybe I could find a way to do that with short stories. Okay, so we have one more. Naima, you have another question? You want to ask it?
Oh, it wasn't really a question. I was just curious about everyone's reading habits, and if during the pandemic you found yourselves reading more. I know I did, and I also smiled a lot at all of the newscasters photographed or videoed with unrealistic books behind them that they purportedly read. I mean, classics. It was a very funny time for books, I think, during the height of the pandemic, during the crescendo leading up to it. Everything was around books, it seemed. So I'm just wondering.
I like to read.
You know what I'm talking about?
I like to read 3 books at the same time. That way it could be a hybrid in my mind.
Oh, yes, yes. And also because I totally agree with that, because of the moods. You're in different moods for different books. I find that is very true. Anyway, that was my comment and question, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have a question? Rebecca used to go to college with me at Mills College, Oakland, California.
Yes.
FYI.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Yannick and Joanna. Also, those were such amazing stories to hear. Can you guys hear me?
We could hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. I've got these things in. Okay, so here's my question. This one is for you, Mark, solely because it's really about your novel. As you know, we've talked a little bit about, I've been volunteering, teaching at San Quentin Prison for the last 8 years, on and off. And so I'm really curious about the perception that people have about prison, and the sort of idea, often people ask me, isn't it so scary for you to go in there? Aren't you so worried? And it's the exact opposite. The students are some of the best students I've ever had, having taught for over 25 years, and they're so engaged.
Wow.
And they're so kind, they're thoughtful, they're great at discussion. And so I'm just so interested in your presentation. And I'm curious about the impetus behind why you wanted to choose, because I feel like it's such an understood and it's a very judged and understood population of people who are just also people, And so I'm just curious with this reading that you did, what gave you that? What was the catalyst? What was
I'm actually excited because I'm going to actually talk to someone at Bard College here in New York, because I want to start working with some of the prisoners in Rikers Island. But yeah, I started writing by reading prison literature when I was 17. Probably because I thought that's where I was going. So it was like a brochure. I thought maybe I should just brush up. But I found that prison writers are incredibly honest, you know, and just brutally beautiful. And the most of the prison literature I read were in the 70s. I mean, wow. And they were so creatively done. The book that made me want to be a writer was by Jack Henry Abbott, In the Belly of the Beast. And I don't know if people are familiar with this story, but Norman Mailer helped Jack Henry Abbott get out of prison. He was a state-raised convict. He was just so traumatized being a state-raised convict that there was a misunderstanding at a restaurant. He ended up stabbing a waiter to death and being sent back to prison. But particularly during the 60s and the 70s, it was kind of in vogue to have a prison writer as your, new pet project. And a lot of the bourgeois, and they didn't really understand where he was coming from, not just as a writer, but as a human being a state-raised convict. And I have to say, my brother was in prison for a decade for a petty drug charge. And a friend of mine from my college actually was my brother's creative writing teacher, which made him want to write creative writing, which made me want to teach in prison one day. So yeah, it's just so much talent that's just needs to be tapped into there. So much rage, so much beauty. And I really commemorate what you do because it's not easy work, but it's very rewarding. And they're so intelligent people, So yeah, thank you. Did I answer your question or kind of?
You absolutely did. And I wanted to say at the end of what you were just saying, it's so true. The talent is absolutely miraculous. Considering what is really beautiful about literature is the myriad of realities that we can enter into. And so if you have, basically you're dealing with a bunch of monks, they've been sitting and they've been ruminating on their experiences. And so there's so much to say about that. There's so much beautiful stuff that I've read. That's just really, I feel very blessed that I have the opportunity. It's not hard at all. It's a gift.
Before we have about maybe 4 minutes left before I let you go, there was one thing I wanted to say to you, Rebecca, was that one of the impetus for Messiahs was a poem I wrote back in Oakland, 2006, I think. And it was about a man driving through the countryside, and he's describing how beautiful everything is. And then he gets to this place and you realize he's driving himself to San Quentin. And it's called The Big Day. And it was, what if you can drive yourself to prison? And that kind of sparked the seed of, wow, proxyism, and I don't even know what I'm getting at with it, even after I've written the book, but there's something about proxyism and altruism. Who would do that, go to prison for someone else and die for them, but yeah, that was actually inspired by a poem. One of the things that inspired it was a poem about driving yourself to San Quentin, because I was driving to San Quentin and it looks really beautiful on the outside.
It's beautiful inside too.
It looks better than Philadelphia.
It's gorgeous inside. It is crazy. It's beautiful. Yeah, no, it's true.
So we have 2 minutes left. Are there any quick questions or? Bonnie, you waving? Can you unmute, Bonnie? Let me see. I'm trying to unmute you.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I was working on a documentary for prison reform, and I recently attended a Zoom with Angela Davis. Have you been in touch with her, Mark?
Angela Davis?
Yes.
I wish.
She wrote a book. Here it is, Are Prisons Obsolete? And I think you might enjoy talking to her. She's an amazing scholar, and I like what you did. I mean, I'm trying not to cry. I used to work for an offshoot of Death Row Records, and I got to know a lot of people who were in the prison system. And it's something I'm writing about now. And wow, what you wrote was so powerful. I'm still trying to come down, but such imagery. But you're raising consciousness. It's fiction, but you provoke people to think. And this is so powerful. I love what you all did. I learned a lot from you, Joanna. The imagery was superb. Wow. And Yannick, wow. Tunisia, it's funny. I was thinking of using that as a backdrop in one of my stories. It was rich. I really enjoyed this evening, and thank you all very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, those death row attorneys that I was speaking with, they meant a lot. Meant a lot. I really loved them, and yeah, the writing is still not over because now I think there's an activism component that comes with writing the book, and after you write it, and
Yeah.
I would love to read it in prisons and detention centers. So, man, I'm scared actually for obvious reasons. So, yeah. So, anything else anyone want to ask, or Yannick, Joanna, want to talk about before we break off? We have about maybe 1 minute, I guess. All right. I am going to remind everyone, thank you for joining us first and foremost. This was great. I really enjoyed this, and I love hearing you, Joanna and Yannick. Please, you write too many things, okay? You have too many novels, you have too many short story collections, and stop. But thank you both for just being daring and being courageous, and just sometimes I don't think we do things to be courageous because we just do them. Is what we do. It's just what we do. And you do what you do so well. Thank you so much. I want to remind everybody that the FC2 contests are open until November the 1st. The Ronald Sukanik Prize will be judged by Mariam Krolos. I believe I saw Mariam here. And the Catherine Doctoral Prize will be judged by Christina Rivera Garza. All FC2 books are currently 40% off, both print and ebooks, and all the ebooks are $5.97. Once again, thank you, everybody. See, Joanna got the big heart for us, and it is 9:30 p.m. Thursday night here where I am. I don't know what time it is for you all, but thank you so much for Faces of the Divine. Thank you so much. No division, no separation. We are. And those who are contemplating a novel or a short story collection or a collection of poetry or a screenplay, start here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. See you next time.